Well, hello and welcome to the webinar. My name's Sally and I'm one of the Wellness and Behaviour Change coaches at the charity. And tonight we've got a whistle-stop tour of sleep. So better sleep, better life. So just to let you know that this will be recorded. It is being recorded. It will be available to you afterwards as well if you'd like to watch it again. There'll be an opportunity, hopefully, at the end of the webinar for some question and answers. So you're very welcome to pop those into the Q&A chat box. And also, just so that you know, the recording won't be of the Q&A answers. It will only be of the main part of the webinar. So what we're going to cover is information about the process of sleep, maybe looking as well at how to address barriers to achieving that good sleep, because it's often something we find challenging, and then looking at some solutions which may overcome those barriers. And as part of that, we're going to be looking at process of sleep, impact of poor sleep and what disrupts sleep, interventions to support and improve sleep, impact of working shifts and how to reduce the impact, and then some signposting for further help if required, and then the Q&A. So to begin with, just going to talk a little bit about the body clock. So our natural biological process works within a 24-hour pattern. This won't be any surprise to anybody. And that body clock is set to 24 hours, and significantly it's regulated by light exposure. So we are biologically designed to be asleep during the night and to be awake during the day. So anything that happens that challenges that, so such as shift work, there are other things I know, it can be quite difficult because that's not our natural physiology, it's not our natural biology. Sleep's easily disrupted. Again, I don't think that'll be any great surprise to people. Lots of different things do that. Physical and psychological issues and illnesses, jet lag, working shifts. So lots of things disrupt that natural body clock and that sleep pattern. And then there's something called melatonin, which is a sleep hormone, and that plays a really key part in regulating that circadian rhythm, that body clock, and it's triggered by darkness. So it's serotonin that converts into melatonin once we're light deprived and there isn't any light. So it can't kick in a light or semi-light environment, though hence the requirement for blackout blinds if we're needing to sleep during the day. So we often get asked what normal sleep length is, and using the word sort of normal very, very carefully, I would say on average, research does suggest that most of us need something between 7 and 9 hours of quality sleep per night. But I really would like to emphasise that it's around the quality of sleep, and some people do get by very well on less sleep, less than the 7 hours. So it could be that they routinely get 6 or 6.5 hours, but if that's of a good quality sleep and that's the way that they operate at their sort of premium level, then that's absolutely fine. There's no sort of hard and fast rule, but generally speaking, 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep is what we need to function as well as we can. So I'm just going to explain a little bit about this a sleep pattern, the cycles that we go through as we sleep. I think it's important to note that we don't go to sleep straight away, our head hits the pillow and then sleep solidly for those 7 hours or 9 hours or whatever. We sleep in 1.5 to 2 hour cycles, and they go on throughout the night. So we are biologically designed to have periods where we are either fully awake or very much semi-conscious and have some awareness of what's going on around us, albeit that could be quite fleeting. So to start with, when we first get into bed, in a sleep pattern, we're talking, this is very average, somebody that doesn't have any specific sort of sleep issues as such, we will experience a very light transitional sleep. So that's where we feel really drowsy. Sleep begins for us. We might notice that we have little muscle twitches or jerks during that period as we're starting to relax. Very easy to wake somebody up during stage 1 sleep, really easy. Stage 2 is different. It's a much more stable sleep. So there are lots of chemicals that begin to be produced in the brain, and they block the senses. So it makes it much more difficult for us to be woken up. And it's often referred to, if you read any articles or in the newspapers or books, etc., as light non-dream sleep. That's quite a common sort of title for that stage 2 sleep. So much less aware of what's going on around us. In stage 1, very easy to wake us up. We're not really that sleepy. Stage 2, you will need to give somebody a bit of a shove to wake them up. A gentle shove at that, or if you speak to somebody, then they would probably be able to arouse reasonably easily from that stage of sleep, but still not as much as you would from stage 1. Then we go into what is a really important part of sleep, that deep sleep, which is referred to as stages 3 and 4 quite often, and that's the maintenance time to restore the body. All the repair and recovery happens during this deep sleep. So what you would notice there, if you were looking at a sonogram, so looking at the brain waves that go on during that stage of sleep, it would be a very gentle pattern, a soft wave pattern like that. So very little electrical activity in the brain. And then in this example, somebody then might go back into that light non-dream sleep for a while. Sleepwalking can occur during stage 2 sleep. I think it's important to advise that sleepwalking doesn't normally happen, or it doesn't happen during dream sleep. People tend to think, oh, people are acting out their dreams, but that's not the case. I'll go on to explain a little bit about that in a minute. We will then, in this particular cycle, you can see somebody then dips into their dream sleep. That is a sort of revitalization time for the memory, for the mind, and brain activity is really high during that time. Exact opposite of the deep sleep with the gentle brain waves. There's lots and lots of sharp electrical activity going on in the brain during that period of sleep. And significantly, the muscles are paralyzed during that time also. So you won't see any movements other than the rise and fall of the chest if you're watching somebody sleep, and their eyes darting rapidly from left to right underneath the eyelids. But the body's paralyzed. That is to stop us acting out dreams. So it's a safety mechanism. And then quite often what will happen, that will be a sort of roughly 1.5 hour, 2 hour cycle, and we'll then pop back up into that stage 1 sleep, where it might be a really light sleep again, or we might wake up, we might turn over, we might notice that we're a little bit uncomfortable because the body has been sort of in a paralyzed state during dream sleep. Sometimes we can be a bit uncomfortable because we might have been lying in an awkward position. And that's the time, annoyingly, when we might need to, we might notice we're too hot, we're too cold, we need the loo. We then maybe something's on our mind that was triggered by a dream, and so we start overthinking. So that's usually the time that happens. But then quite often you will get a seamless movement, if you're lucky, and go back over into stage 2 sleep. So that's generally what happens during a typical sleep pattern exam. That's just an example. So just to reiterate, deep sleep, lots of benefits to deep sleep. Blood pressure drops and breathing slows, the muscles relax. There's really good blood supply, so that helps us to repair. Tissue growth, organ, muscle and bone repair occurs, and significantly cortisol decreases and the immune system increases. It gets a boost, so it's really important because cortisol is the stress hormone. So if we don't get good sleep, it means that our stress is likely to be higher the following day. So if you think of deep sleep quite simply as a battery pack and a way of recharging the body, that's quite a useful way of looking at it. And then hormones that regulate our appetite are released also during that time, and growth hormones also released. So quite a lot going on during that deep sleep. And then again, very different dream sleep. I'm going to go to that bottom point there on the right-hand side there. It provides energy to the brain. If you think of it as your battery pack to your brain, dream sleep, whereas deep sleep was the battery pack to the body. So the brain's highly active, as I mentioned, and we dream during that time, even if we don't remember them. Most people do dream. Muscles are turned off, we're immobile, eyes darting backwards and forwards underneath the eyelids, but it supports our daytime performance. It really helps with cognitive function and just that sense of well-being. We need the dream sleep and the deep sleep. We need the combination of the two. So that's why the cycles go around, so that we've got the option to have the dream sleep and the deep sleep as well. Sleep does change as we age. The amount of sleep we get often decreases, not because we need less, but because we're not as able to get the sleep that we need. And there could be lots of different reasons for that. So it can be that, we may be experiencing more discomfort or pain. We may need to go to the loo in the middle of the night, lots of different reasons. But it isn't about needing less. It's more about our ability wanes a little bit. It starts as early as being in the 40s for men and 50s for women. And it means that we're most easily disturbed and less likely to go back to sleep as we get older. So it's just worth bearing in mind. It's nothing necessarily that we've done. It's a sort of byproduct of our biology almost, that our physiology. If we're going back to very early caveman times, it was important for the women to be, they were usually the caregivers. So they looked after children and grandchildren, so their sleep needed to be better so they could maintain their health for longer, whereas the men of those era, they were hunter-gatherers. They were the ones that were doing a lot of the physical effort outside of the environment, and that meant that that there wasn't this requirement for them to be around as long. Basically, it's all a bit brutal, but that's kind of, we've still inherited this archaic system. So it's just worth bearing in mind we do still need the same amount of sleep. So anything that we can do to help us get that, even as we get older, that's got to be a positive. So when we think about sleep problems, it can be lots of different things. Difficulty falling asleep, waking up lots of time during the night, so more than the sort of after the hour and a half, 2 hour cycle. And then significantly, if we do wake after that cycle, not being able to get back to sleep, that's one of the key parts. And waking up too early, that can be really, really difficult. But the key thing to notice is if we're getting that unrefreshed sleep, then there's something going on, and it's worth having an investigate and trying to find out what it might be, and getting curious about what could be causing it. No surprises, there are significant impacts to not getting enough sleep. Some of those are more sort of immediate, shorter term, and some of them are longer term. So some of the immediate issues that we might notice, obviously fatigue, we're going to feel really tired, but it also affects our motivation. We can find it much more difficult to get enthusiastic about things because we have so much less energy. It can lead to unhelpful thoughts and feelings, especially if it's ongoing and we get tired all the time. That it can become quite challenging then. It also lowers our pain threshold, makes our experience of pain more severe. And it reduces our focus and concentration. So we're much more likely to have accidents and things like that if we are sleep deprived or aren't sleeping well. Problem solving is more of a challenge. We can have memory issues and also problems with balance. The systems that are required to keep us upright and balanced are actually quite complex, and the body has to work very hard in order to maintain that. So if we're not sleeping well, we can often notice that we're more clumsy, or that we might sort of feel slightly dizzy occasionally, and that's because the balance system is having to work so very hard, and yet we don't have the energy. And the battery pack hasn't recharged to help us with that. So looking at some of the more long-term implications, our immune system can be challenged. There's reduced testosterone and increased risk of these various different chronic conditions. So things like type 2 diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, some types of cancer, and overall a reduced life expectancy if this goes on for a really long period of time and we're not getting sufficient sleep. So just highlighted here a few of the sleep disruptors that we might encounter. And they tend to sort of break down a little bit into sort of 4 different categories overall. So we've got psychological causes, so things like stress, anxiety, depression, life events, so coping with things like bereavement, overthinking, and then some psychological disorders, so they can cause significant disruption. Sometimes it's physical causes, so injury, pain, need in the loo, medical chronic conditions. Sometimes medication can have a really adverse effect on sleep, menopause and sleep disorders. So they're the physical causes. And then also behavioural causes. So things like having caffeine too late at night, too near bedtime, drugs and or alcohol, too much or too little food, using technology, shift work, irregular sleep schedules, and disagreements, that kind of thing. And then the environmental causes. The top one of those that always comes up is noise, and the top one in that is usually snoring, partners snoring. So partners may be coming into bed later and disrupting, could be children needing things, pets, neighbours, traffic, nature, you name it. Noise is the top one of the environmental causes. And then sometimes it could be just that our environment is uncomfortable, the bed isn't sufficiently comfortable, the bedding isn't right, so it's too hot or too cold, there's too much light, or it sometimes can be an unfamiliar place. You know, if we're going on a holiday, it can be really nice, but often the first night can be really challenging because we're not familiar with the environment. So you can see there's lots of different disruptors. A lot of them, there's something that we can do about them. So behavioural causes, we can do something quite easily about those. We can often manage that. Psychological causes, we can find ways to cope and manage with some of those. Physical causes can be much more challenging, but obviously if medication is used effectively and pain management techniques, they can help. And then environmental causes, they can sometimes be really challenging also, because, you know, if you maybe want your window open to well ventilate your room, but it's noisy because of neighbours or traffic, that can be challenging. But there are little things that we can do with the environment, like getting blackout blinds and things like that. Just a very brief mention about alcohol. Alcohol can severely impair sleep. It can seem like it really helps with the onset of it, because it quite often does, but it massively impacts on the quality of sleep and the duration of sleep. And part of the problem is, going back to the deep sleep, the slide on that, the body needs to process the alcohol out of the system, because as nice as it may taste, it's actually a toxin, and the body recognizes it as a toxin. So before it can perform all the repair of the organs and, you know, all the bones and muscles and everything, it has to get rid of the alcohol first. So it's wasting the time during deep sleep that could be spent on that, having to process the alcohol. Obviously, if you've had an alcoholic drink and your body's had time to process that before you go to bed, then it's not an issue. So this is referring to alcohol that's taken right up to bedtime, before it's had a chance to get the units out of the system. So possible solutions to poor sleep. One of the key things that keeps coming up, both at the workshops that we deliver and just from reading and research, is that we don't always allow thinking time during the day. So if you've been very busy and you've been rushing around and you've perhaps been at work and then come home, and then there's been a whole lot of other tasks to do, the first time you might get to yourself where you can actually process how your day's gone and actually have a little bit of thinking time is when your head hits the pillow at night in a dark room without any distractions. So if we can allow thinking time during the day, then that takes away the need to do that when our head hits the pillow. So that can be really helpful. It's one of the easiest things to do, just to fit that into an evening routine for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just to sit and allow that thinking time to process what's gone on during the day. And if something's on your mind, write it down. That can be really, really helpful. If we write things down, just thinking things, for example, that they can go round and round in our heads. If we write them down, it's out of our mind, it's on a piece of paper. And if we read it back, it uses a different part of the brain again. So we're using the brain in a different way, and it can really help. So I would recommend that those two together are the top sort of ones for experimenting with. If you think that your sleep is suffering, allow thinking time during the day, and if something's on your mind, write it down, write it out. Start a routine you can keep to. We're creatures of habit, we like our routine. So if you can have a bedtime routine that works for you, and that can look like anything, it can be, the process of what your wind down might be like. It might be that you're having a read, but that if it's an exciting book or a thriller, that that's maybe not the best thing. So it might be listening to some soothing music. It could be having a hot drink. It could be having a shower or bath before bed. But anything that over a period of time signals to your body and mind that it's time to sleep, that you're building up to that, it will really help. Making sure the room's as dark as possible, not too warm, and really well ventilated is important. And sometimes learning relaxation techniques can help, both to, before sleep, but also to get us back to sleep if we wake up during the night. That can also be really useful. And then sometimes it might be discussing the potential impact of your medication or medical conditions on your sleep with your GP. So that can sometimes be an option. And looking at some other little practical ideas, try earplugs and/or an eye mask. They can be really useful. Talk worries through with somebody that you trust. That massively helps with the psychological side of things. Make sure that your mattress, pillow and bedding is as comfortable as possible. Try a milky drink. It has to be cow's milk, I'm afraid, for anybody that's lactose intolerant. I know that's not going to work, but when you heat milk, it becomes a soporific. It changes the chemical compounds in it and it becomes a soporific, so it helps us to sleep. It won't work with the alternative milk substitutes, I'm afraid. Some people swear by lavender. They really like to use lavender. Other people, that it's a scent that they really don't like. So obviously, again, it's very much personal preference, but that can help. You can get room sprays, pillow sprays, you can get little sachets that go under the pillow. It does have for those that tolerate it and like it, it does help us to feel relaxed and sleepy. From a medical point of view, if you have acid reflux, it can really, really help to use a wedge pillow. So it's shaped like a piece of cheese, and you put your pillow on that top bit, and it just alters the posture so that it means you're less likely to get acid reflux. So we've had feedback from some of the workshops, certainly that delivered at the centres in the past, that say that they've really found them helpful, that they've made a big difference, and they didn't think something so small could make a difference. So that might be worth trying if you do suffer from indigestion and acid reflux. Having a warm bath or shower as part of your bedtime routine, not too hot, not too cold, is quite good. And then if you can't get back to sleep, do try a relaxation technique before you get up and give up, because then once you put in light on, then your melatonin levels drop and it's going to be more difficult to get back to sleep. So try that first, often really helpful. And then using heat pads or cool pads to help ease physical symptoms and discomfort. So just going to have a little look at working night shifts, because I know a lot of people do have to work night shifts, and it does have an impact. It can increase the risk of injury. Chronic fatigue is a really common problem with regular night shift work. And research has shown that it does significantly impact on people aged over 40. So that you're more likely to be able to cope with it under 40 than you are over 40. Social isolation can be a challenge, and shift work can impact massively, obviously, on family life, and be really disrupted. So it's just being aware of all these sort of issues around working nights, and then looking at some solutions, some things to do to offset that. So using days off to get extra preemptive or banked sleep prior to a night shift is really helpful. Also power napping. Power napping's fine for people that find that helpful. Just limit it to around about 40 minutes, because if you go over the 40 minutes, then you'll end up feeling really groggy because your body's dropped into a deeper sleep. But banking sleep can really help. So for example, if your optimum is 7 hours a night, and then you, because of working your night shift, obviously it's going to disrupt that pattern. If you can get 8 hours the night before, that's putting a little bit in your sleep bank. It's not always possible, because sometimes it's really challenging to bank sleep. It's much easier to do it the other way after a night shift, because you're obviously feeling more tired. But banking sleep can really help, and it's definitely worth experimenting with if you haven't tried it before. It's no use just going back to getting the normal 7 hours afterwards. You do need to see if you can get more before or after. So pay off that sleep debt by getting that restorative sleep the following a night's shift. So if you can, it's not like for like. So if you've only had 4 hours sleep and you would normally have 7, then you don't have to have the 3 hours. You don't need 3 hours to make up, but you do need 50% of that if possible. Making sure that your sleep environment's dark and cool and well ventilated where possible. And so for some people we've had in the past, they've talked about how they need to set some ground rules and things if they're with colleagues in a dormitory, because that can be quite challenging. So it's worth doing that. And avoiding stimulants such as caffeine, and large meals and very sugary snacks, maybe 3 hours before going to bed, and avoid drinking alcohol. Don't go to bed hungry, obviously, but it's just being careful about what you eat and not having a really big meal, because that could cause a lot of discomfort and it's likely to disrupt sleep. Just a few extra little tips for managing night shift work. Research has shown that trying to eat at the beginning and the end of a shift is a good idea, especially if you've got a little bit of time at the end of that shift to get home, etc. Or when you get in, you're just going to have a little while to let anything that you've eaten settle, and not having had a really big meal before that. Keeping hydrated, absolutely key. That really helps, really important. Being as physically fit as possible. That also offsets some of the challenges around shift work. And then using stress reduction techniques to keep cortisol levels under control where you can. And some people have said that on the way home, they consider that they wear sunglasses or blue light blocking glasses, and that can also help. So there's lots of things that we can do. And there's some sort of signposting that I can give you to get more information from that. So there are some apps that can help. So there's Sizz and Calm. They've both got in-app purchases. I find Calm really good, but unfortunately it isn't a free app. But I like sleep stories, so they work really well for me. You can get nature sounds and rain and all sorts of different things, and music and meditations. But Sleep Pillow and Deep Sleep, we've had a lot of people say they found them really helpful and really good, and they are free. One of the sort of books that I really like is How to Sleep Well. It's by Dr. Neil Stanley. It's a very thin book and a really quick read, but it's great. There's plenty of humour in it. It's very practical. So where we haven't got time tonight to go through all of the different things you can do to improve sleep, there are lots of tips in there. And Why We Sleep, Matthew Walker, that's quite an interesting book that tells you more about why we sleep and what happens. And then Lockley and Foster, a very short introduction to sleep. That's also very good, a good book. Websites, our website's full of really useful stuff that can sort of signpost you to. It's got lots of useful articles about sleep and information about shift work, things like that. Every Mind Matters, their trouble sleeping section's very good. And also Sleep Station and Sleepio, they both offer a 6-week online course, and it's free in some areas with a GP referral. It's a bit of a postcode lottery, I'm afraid, but it's worth asking. If you really think you're suffering from insomnia, it is worth going to your GP to see if they can refer you. It's a cognitive behavioural therapy courses, and they have very high success rate. And then there's a little link about sleep deprivation and effects on the body. So this information is available to you if you've got MyFFC, or if you'd like to get MyFFC. You can access all of the things that I've talked about there, and the information on the previous slides for signposting is also in one of the groups that are on my FFC call Wellbeing, Resilience and Thriving. So that can also be a good idea if you would like some more information, because it's a whistle-stop tour. There's an awful lot to say about sleep and not a lot of time to say it in. So you can find out more information there.